Oh, hi, I didn't see you there. My name is Bliss Foster. Welcome back to the Margiela series where we are exploring every single runway show that Martin Margiela produced at Maison Martin Margiela. Today we find ourselves in spring-summer 1998 and we have so much to cover it's ridiculous. This is the first season where Martin Margiela has begun his work at Hermes. After a lot of negotiations and rumors at the time, he has finally landed there and he has begun work. So Martin is now officially, at this point in history, he is splitting his time between his work at his own house and that of Hermes. But for today, we are here. Hey, the Patreon is the only place where you can actually watch the entirety of these episodes. The extended episodes are the only place where we go into the nuances of the clothes themselves, looking at how the story of Margiela is expressed in the sewing and the details and the darts and all of the little cuts and nuances that make these clothes so incredibly special. If you don't know, Patreon is a way for you to give a few bucks a month to the channel so that we can continue to run. You also get a bunch of special stuff if you sign up. Back to it. Huge news! Martin Margiela reached out to Grandma Ray Kawakubo and asked her if she wanted to do a joint showing for this Paris Fashion Week, and she agreed. Grandma Ray and Marty have had a very extensive relationship up to this point, and I feel like it's important to highlight what that relationship is. So welcome to the episode within an episode titled Martin Margiela, Ray Kawakubo's oldest son. First, the facts. Ray Kawakubo was one of the founders of the deconstruction movement in fashion. The brand started in 1969 and they incorporated in 1973. Comme des Garçons was successful in Japan, so they started showing in Paris in 1981. But Martin Margiela had graduated from the Royal Academy in Antwerp, Belgium just 2 years prior in 1979. When Comme des Garçons was showing in Paris, Martin Margiela was in Paris working at Jean Paul Gaultier. The tradition of deconstruction in Paris fashion would be continued by Martin Margiela and then later by his friends in the Antwerp Six. But here, okay, so that's the facts. Here's the really crazy stuff. In 1984, the first Comme des Garçons store opened in Belgium. You know who opened it? Jenny Meerens, who's the co-founder of Maison Martin Margiela. It's Martin's business partner and one of his early supporters right after he got out of school. And in fact, Jenny went for a meeting with Ray Kawakubo in Tokyo right after she opened the store, and she wore head to toe Martin Margiela's work. And she asked Ray Kawakubo at the end of the meeting, "Do you like my outfit?" And Ray said that she liked her shoes and bought a pair off of her. Jenny then rushed to a telephone and called Martin in the middle of the night and said, "I sold your shoes to Ray Kawakubo." This, by the way, was not a pair of tabbies. It was part of a collection that he did in the mid-80s that helped him to win the Golden Thimble Award. And throughout his career at the Maison showing in Paris, Ray Kawakubo would end up coming to a lot of Martin's shows. She clearly liked what he was doing. Finally, last point, 2 seasons ago in spring-summer 1997, Ray Kawakubo and Martin Margiela covered very similar topics. I'm not aware of any planning or communication that they had regarding this, but both the Lumps and Bumps collection and the Stockman collection were very similar. Both of them dealt with the relationship that women's bodies have to the clothes that they're wearing. And here we are. For 14 years, Ray Kawakubo and Martin Margiela have been orbiting each other, and we finally see them connect in this show. How is there not an internationally recognized holiday to commemorate this? Just so there's not any confusion, Ray Kawakubo and Martin Margiela did not design anything about each other's collection. This was not a collab in any sense. It was mostly just a business decision to share a space for their presentation. But designers don't typically do that unless they have a lot of respect for each other's work and feel like it would be mutually beneficial for the two collections to be shown in the same space, even if they're not working on each other's collections. Both presentations will be boosted by the presence of the other. Thank you for joining me for this episode within an episode. Let's now get back to the episode. Spring-summer 1998 was held at the Conciergerie. How do we say it?
Conciergerie.
Spring 98 was held at the Conciergerie, which is the place where Marie Antoinette and other royals were held to await execution during the French Revolution. It is just a stone's throw away from the Louvre in the first arrondissement. This is the first Martin Margiela show that is shown in the first arrondissement. We remember that throughout their history, they have taken delight in not showing where everyone else was showing. It's standard at that time for all of the brands in Paris Fashion Week to show at these big tents that are set up near the Louvre. All of Paris Fashion Week, for the most part, happens in one place. But Martin and his team have taken delight in showing in places where normal people typically are, like a playground or a post office or circus grounds. Why are they showing in the first arrondissement now? I honestly have no idea. To be fair, they're not showing exactly where everyone else is. They're technically across the river. This might have had something to do with the joint showing with Grandma Ray. It might also just be the Maison embracing their own legitimacy. They're a major player in Paris Fashion Week now, and there's nothing wrong with them making that clear. Folks, all rise. This is the flat show. All garments presented here may be laid completely flat on the ground. The team used the pattern pieces from the previous season as the base for this concept. We remember that in the last season there were a number of pieces that were made of literal paper pattern pieces that had been joined together. The self-imposed constraint of flatness made for some incredible looking clothes and a few innovations that I'm honestly surprised haven't been adopted by more fast fashion companies now. You may be seated. It feels so good to do these all rises with like the major hallmarks of the house, doesn't it? This is great. This is also the first season where the brand started doing their signature accordion style lookbooks. This accordion lookbook is not from Spring '98, but it gives you a good idea of what they actually looked like. Okay, so the way that this show was actually executed is fairly complicated, and we don't have any video footage of the actual show happening. The footage for this season is just the projection, what was shown up on the wall to the people who showed up at the presentation itself. But that presentation was rather complex, so in order to tell you about it, I'm just gonna read directly from the Women's Collections book, which has become the Bible for making this series possible. It's like I could rephrase it, but let's just go ahead and read it straight from the horse's mouth. I've got 3 paragraphs for you and some images so that we can kind of get an idea of what we're looking at. At the location, the crowd first moved towards a corner with the Margiela installation, which was a circle marked by 5 16-foot-high towers covered in white cotton, which surrounded a 6th identical tower in the center. The 5 towers were identified by a letter or number that corresponded with guests' invitations. As in all of Margiela's shows, there was no specific floor plan. Viewers positioned themselves in front of one of the towers, standing up or seated. And so began the show. It has quotes, I don't know. 20 men of various ages dressed in white lab coats flowed into the room, pulling 5 racks covered with a piece of white cotton fabric. They separated into 5 groups, one in front of each tower. The lights grew dim. A film was projected that presented the first of 10 sequences, illustrating the 10 themes of the collection. Each sequence was accompanied by a different piece of music, from Yoko Ono to a classical song with Indian music in between, all featuring a woman's piercing voice. It was preceded by an explanatory text in French, English, and Japanese. Amid the applause of the crowd, 4 men from each group presented the clothing on hangers to the audience as in a clothing store. For the finale, at the foot of each tower, a man in a white lab coat went up to a chair on which a pot of red paint had been placed. He climbed on top and painted "end" on the white cotton fabric in a different language for each tower. He then stepped down, took off his coat, threw it on the floor, and went back to join the other men who had left the room with the racks. Fin. Pieces of this could possibly be a continuation of the dolls wardrobe stuff that started in fall '94. Margiela is on record saying that he got massive inspiration from making clothes for his dolls as a child, so it stands to reason that he would have likely had paper dolls as well, the clothes of which would have been certainly flat. We also see from the In His Own Words documentary that Martin Margiela was pretty crafty as a kid, very arts and crafts oriented, and he had these paintings of different people and he would swap out their clothing and maybe their hair by using different paper cutouts and superimposing them on top of the painting. Here we can see him doing that with his grandma, which is mega wholesome. It could also just be as simple as they say it in the book, that this is all just based off of the pattern pieces from the previous season. Kind of a reminder to the wearer of where the clothes and the design come from, that it's not just a piece that poofed into existence, that it's the result of a lot of different labor and engineering and cutting and measuring and lots of people being involved. The reason that the shirts and other items from this season are able to lay flat in the first place is because they moved the entire neck hole onto the front panel of the shirt. Let me show you, hang on. Okay, so the shirt that I'm wearing, and on this shirt, the neck hole is divided between the front panel and the back panel of the shirt. You see? There's a shoulder seam right there. And the neck hole is split. Half of it's on the back and half of it's on the front. So by moving the neck hole entirely onto the front of the piece, that then allows it to lay totally flat. Whereas with this, if we throw it onto a table, it can't ever be really flat because the neck hole is split between these 2 different pattern pieces. But if you move it onto the front, then it happily lays flat. Another interesting note here is that, like last season, they kept the vertical camera work for this one. So if you're taking notes on this, you can go ahead and jot down that Martin Margiela invented TikTok. Aha. Finally, because of a very brief interview with ID Magazine, we learned two important things. One is that the Maison had a 19-member team at the time. The second thing we learned is that their distinctive style of doing interviews has officially started. We know from the We Margiela documentary that Patrick Scallon was their communications director and that he sort of helped Martin to figure out the way in which they were going to do these interviews. Everyone, of course, wanted to just speak directly with Martin, but Martin was not cool with that, and so they started doing interviews via fax. Patrick would take those questions, take them to Martin, kind of hash them out with him, and then eventually Patrick landed on a rhythm by which he could respond to these things, knowing confidently that he was speaking in Martin's voice. But the idea from the interviewer's perspective was that they were speaking to the entire Maison. Instead of answering with I, they would answer with we. We have so much more to cover with the specifics of these clothes, and if you want to see the extended episode for this one and for tons of other Margiela episodes, including an exclusive Margiela episode, it's all on the Patreon. You can click the link that's on the screen right now. Click that link or the link that is always in the description of every single video. It's just patreon.com/blissfoster. The support would mean a ton to me. This is my full-time job. It's my only source of income. And you'd get to watch all these episodes and know that they are proudly brought to you by you. I love you enough to respect your wishes to not be tickled. Goodbye.